Broadcasting from Silicon Valley, California, this is Conversations with Jennylyn.
You're watching Conversations with Jennylyn, and today I have another fascinating person to share with you. He is a global affairs analyst, a contributor to CNN Opinions, speaker, a writer, a host, Global Impact podcast, Covid19 Expert commentator, Mr. Michael Bociurkiw. Michael, thank you so much for joining Conversations with Jennylyn.
Pleasure to be here. And can I add one more thing to the list?
Please.
Amateur chef or aspiring chef. And I think someday I want to have a food truck serving world food. That just came into my mind during lockdown. So there you go.
And Michael, I've tasted your cooking and I think it will be very successful.
Thank you. And I think the last time we saw each other was in the Bay Area a long, long time ago.
No, wasn't it in the Hamptons? Did I see you after the Hamptons?
That's right, the Hamptons.
And you gave me some spice that you had gotten, I think, in Indonesia, and I still have some of it. I use it sparingly.
Excellent. Yeah, because no one knows when we're going to be traveling again. So hang on to that stuff. It's very valuable now.
Thank you. So tell us, Michael, you have such an impressive list. I don't know where to begin. How about we start with your COVID-19 expertise?
I live on Vancouver Island normally, and previous to COVID breaking out really in late February, March, what happened was I was in Portugal. I was kind of doing a mini sabbatical. And then when it hit, I decided, well, it's time to come back to North America. I made a beeline for Vancouver Island, where I have a beautiful place on the water. But I found out that I'm a very social person, and no matter how long you stay in lockdown, you really, really miss that human interaction. So a week ago, I flew for the first time since mid-March. And you know, I got to tell you, as you know, I also have a thing called Savvy Traveler. I read a lot about travel. I comment a lot about it. I canceled 3 times before actually boarding that airplane because, as you know, I have a high risk threshold, more than most people, but I just didn't feel good about it. And you know what? Talk about my COVID-19 experience. I'm in most of the World Health Organization press conferences, and I asked them the other day after I flew, so what do you guys think? Is it safe to travel? And the takeaway line from that, Jennylyn, was, if it doesn't feel right, it probably isn't right. So it came to the point where I thought, well, I'm going to take all the precautions and get on that plane and fly 5 hours from Vancouver Island here to our nation's capital in Canada, Ottawa. It was two airplane rides, a short one on a propeller plane. It was a full flight. And then the second one was a bit more space. But I got to tell you, it was not comfortable. It was not pleasant. And I even wrote a blog post and I said, whatever little glamour there was left in air travel before COVID, well, it's entirely gone now because of everything that's taking place. So I'm hoping that we can get back to our normal lives as soon as possible. But as you know, your statistics down in the States are not very good still. Here in Canada, we're doing far better. But what is happening, not only here, but in many places in the developed world, is young people are starting to be a lot more, I would even use the word careless about things like wearing masks. Mm-hmm. And it's not that they're really going to contract the virus. If they do, they'll probably be asymptomatic or they'll not get a serious illness. But the problem is they become vectors for it. They carry it to older people or to people with underlying conditions. And that's the big problem. And the other thing we're looking for is in the weeks ahead, when the flu season hits in the Northern Hemisphere, we may face a double whammy. So the other big thing I'm worried about is the economy, the global economy. I'm seeing a lot of negative signs right now, the travel industry only being one. But retail, even though people have a pent-up demand for travel and for shopping and things like that, going out to restaurants, the confidence level just isn't there right now. Right. And kind of to end this answer for you, you know, I know a lot of other people who are as avid travelers as I am, road warriors, and they read my blog post very carefully, and they said, you know what, we're not going to travel for a while. It just isn't worth it. So anyway, glad I'm here. Ottawa's a beautiful city, and I just came back from, okay, I don't go to church very often, but I went today because this is a church that my parents helped build, and it's Ukrainian Catholic. It's actually a shrine. And they had a special Ukrainian Independence Day service because tomorrow is Ukrainian Independence Day,
Okay.
29 years, I believe. And then there was coffee and cake afterwards outside, and people gathered, of course, social distancing, but it was so nice. I missed that so much, to see people gathering and gossiping and sharing food. It was really, really great. So I feel more alive than ever right now. You got me at a good time.
Good. I'm glad I'm getting the best of you during COVID.
Yeah.
Michael, did you have to quarantine after your 5-hour flight?
No, I did not. It's not required. However, I'm staying with a friend, so he had me sit in the back seat in the car and shower when I came, do the washing of the laundry, stuff like that. But I did quarantine when I came back from Europe for 2 weeks, because I had a very crazy schedule. I went from Portugal to Amsterdam. I was covering the beginning of the MH17 trial. And then I went to London to give a talk there at the House of Commons. And then I went to New York, and now this is already mid-March. And I was in New York for 5 days, and that's just when things started to get really eerie. One meeting after another got canceled. I was there. I did 2 interviews on CNN, one with someone in the New York bureau, and then with someone in Atlanta, and then someone in Hong Kong. Usually you go to CNN in New York and you do these, but it was right then that they said no more outside guests. So I did them from my hotel room, and I was supposed to be there 5 days. I ended up leaving after 4. I said, this is getting too creepy. Flights are starting to get canceled. Let's get home. And I got to tell you, when I got on that plane and it took me home, and I felt so good to be back, because not only you're going home, but right away, the Canadian government got out right front and center to all Canadians and said, no one's going to be alone. We're going to help you. If you've lost your income, even if you're a freelancer or if you've been laid off, there's going to be a lot of support. So they came out with a whole suite of programs to support Canadians financially. For example, people who have been furloughed, or even freelancers whose income had been cut, are eligible for $2,000 a month. And they've just extended that for another month. So it's a huge hit on our national debt, which is pretty big. Not as big as yours, but still pretty big in Canadian terms. But that's the kind of country we live in here, is that we have a very strong social safety net. And we never came anywhere close to the numbers you all did. I mean, even on Vancouver Island, we haven't had any new cases for some weeks now, because Canadians, you might have seen, are very obedient. They listen to their government. We never had a revolution. So we tend to be a bit more obedient. We don't question our leaders that much. And masks, the social distancing, washing, hand hygiene, all of that stuff. And during lockdown, I'm telling you, our cities, even our biggest cities, became almost ghost towns. Everyone was indoors. So that goes to show you. And so we've managed to flatten that curve. We are having a few spikes here and there, but overall, we're doing pretty good.
Well, I'm so happy to hear that you have compliant people living in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I'm sure you're aware there are a large percentage of people ignoring all of the rules that are being set to protect us and others, because they think this is a conspiracy. And I've
heard that.
I've asked a few of them. So if it's a conspiracy, how do you explain all the large numbers of the people dying? And the response has been they're not dying from COVID-19.
Well, look, people will continue to die of other causes, natural causes, underlying conditions. What's happening right now is a lot of people are not getting their underlying conditions treated. So that's causing more deaths or more serious illnesses. People understandably do not want to go to the hospital or to a crowded clinic. But what we're having in countries like Russia, which I've written about and commented a lot, and I've interviewed people there, doctors, is that what a lot of doctors are doing there, and I've heard just yesterday in Ukraine the same thing, is that they're recording COVID-19 deaths as pneumonia or something like that, so that the official statistics don't look that bad. But what you've had happen in a lot of the former Soviet Union, but especially Russia, is a hollowing out of the medical system, of the healthcare system. So hospitals are in very poor condition, but not only that, a lot of healthcare workers, a lot of doctors don't have PPE. So I interviewed a doctor for my podcast a few weeks ago. She's actually the personal doctor of Alexei Navalny, the guy who was just poisoned in Russia, the opposition leader.
Yeah.
And she said that people, when they go to our hospitals, they get sick by going to the hospital. So they don't want to go. That's how bad things are right there. They don't have isolation wards, things like that. They don't have proper ventilation systems. In terms of conspiracy, look, you hear that even in normal times when it comes to sicknesses, to vaccines. In Africa, there were rumors that the vaccine is a big conspiracy to make people infertile and so on. And again, the former Soviet Union, we've had a huge problem over the years that people don't trust the governments. Hence, they don't trust these vaccine campaigns. Hence, you have outbreaks to this day of polio, of measles, and of other preventable diseases. I've even heard that the Chinese have deliberately let this go out in the world so that the world suffers. China has come back. Economy is roaring again. All kinds of things. But no, I mean, look.
Sell masks.
Yeah, you're right. But no, this is not a conspiracy. I could tell you that. I've worked on a lot of public health emergency campaigns all over the world. This is something people need to take very seriously. I mean, just last night, I was speaking to a dear friend of mine in Ukraine who is very careful and very smart and well-traveled. And she just got COVID-19. And it is a horrible thing to have. I know Chris Cuomo quite well. I know Brooke Baldwin, 2 anchors on CNN, they both got it. Chris Cuomo, you can look at the YouTube videos he's done or interviews. To this day, he's still hurting. He talks about the long-term consequences of the virus. Even though you feel normal, you still have a kind of brain fog or short-term memory. He doesn't have the same strength he used to. So this is something that not a lot of people talk about, are the long-term consequences of the virus, even if you overcome it. Just go on Facebook and look at some comments that people have posted. They're especially talking about the mental aspects, the loss of short-term memory. Oh, and also the loss of taste and smell that can last for weeks too. The most horrible description I heard from someone who had a very serious case of COVID was, every time you breathe, it feels like you have glass crystals in your lungs, and it's so painful. Yeah. So this is something I would not wish on my worst enemy. Everyone has to take precautions, and it's not rocket science. Wear the mask, social distancing, hand washing, minimum of 20 seconds. You know, and if you're sick, stay home. But look, it's understandable that people want to get out there. They want to go to restaurants and bars, but you don't want to have a second wave. And we're now seeing, you know, the impact, the knock-on effect on the economy in various places. So very, very worrisome.
Michael, you've been a global affairs analyst for how long?
Well, I guess officially from 2016. So previous to that, I was with what's called the Organization for Security Cooperation in Europe, OSCE, based in Vienna, 57 member states, including Canada, US, most of the European countries, including Ukraine and even Russia. So I was seconded by the Canadian government to go. And this was at a time when the Russians illegally annexed Crimea, and then they invaded Eastern Ukraine with their Russian-backed rebels. So I did that for 2 years or so. And that was also around the time when Malaysian Airlines MH17 crashed. So I kind of became very well known, well, even more known because of that crash, because I was on Round the Clock on all world TV.
I was reading and following you.
Yeah. And it was a weird kind of confluence of events because, I mean, I'm of Ukrainian heritage. I've even lived in Malaysia. I've written about Malaysia Airlines. I've covered crashes before, aviation. So it was a weird kind of confluence of events, but it's kind of like God put me there at the right spot. You know, I was there for a purpose. And even though it was a huge toll physically and mentally, I was able to do it. And then eventually I felt like it was time to leave Ukraine. And that's when I thought, one of my former bosses, he's Greek, and you know, they can be very philosophical. He said, he has this rough voice, Michael, you must leave and you fly like an eagle and you go out there and you go get whatever you want. And I took his advice and I said, I want to become independent because, you know, when I was spokesperson for OSC and I was also spokesperson for UNICEF, I could not obviously say what was in my mind all the time. And I had to be extremely, extremely careful. And there was a lot of pressure. So I wanted to regain my voice, feel what it was like to say what's on my mind. And that eventually did happen. I mean, it's not like one day you don't mention the word Russia when you talk about the invasion of Eastern Ukraine, and the next day you do. It's a kind of transitional process, but it's worked very well. You mentioned I'm a contributor to CNN Opinion. That's my main kind of public platform, and I just absolutely love working for them. And you know,
So you actually work for CNN?
No. I'm a freelancer. I contribute 2, sometimes 4 pieces a month, mostly on geopolitics, but international events. But even including here in Canada, we're having a mini scandal, in American terms with our prime minister. And I find whenever I write about my own backyard, that's when I get the most feedback. Lots of fan mail from Canadians. And a lot of them think I'm American because I'm writing for CNN. But no, I'm Canadian, and I know the scene here well. But they don't particularly like foreigners talking negatively about the prime minister. But you know what I always say is that whether it's the prime minister of Canada or the president of Russia or Ukraine or whoever, if I spot something I don't feel is right, that I don't see isn't right, I'm going to call them out for it. And, you know, you have to stick out your neck. There are consequences too, above and beyond mail that isn't very pleasant to read or comments. I mean, I was just on Al Jazeera, 12 hours ago, speaking about Putin and the suspected poisoning of the Russian opposition leader, Alexei Navalny. And it's not like you're self-censoring yourself, but I'm sure I'm not alone when I say this among commentators and journalists, is that there is something in the back of your mind that makes you worry a little bit that they may not take it well and may not react well. But I think in this line of business, you either do it or you don't. I mean, and you have to speak truth to power from time to time.
No, you have to. Otherwise, you're not being a fair reporter. And, there is a difference between opinion and fact. But I think that often, and this is why I wanted to do this show, because I got tired of hearing everybody say that the news was sensationalized and they didn't know what to believe. So I thought, while I'm home doing nothing, why don't I get as many people around the world to tell us from their vantage point what's happening, and so we can at least get some semblance of some portion of that country in terms of what was happening outside of mainstream media. But I think that to be a really good journalist, you have to be honest, and you can't sugarcoat the news, because then you're not sharing the truth.
Yeah,
and so
I'm an opinion writer, to be clear, and an opinion commentator. So I do have my opinion and I do voice it. But I can tell you, for all the attacks on CNN as fake news, I've written for a lot of publications, a lot of outlets. I have never been subject to the scrupulous editing and fact checking that they do. And these are opinion articles. They're not reports, but they're opinion articles. But when you state something that's happened, they fact check it once, twice, 3 times. So I really appreciate that, because not only does it protect you, it also protects them, but it also protects the reader from fake news or rumor filtering through. So, now having said that, I mean, there are certain outlets that are becoming a bit more opinionated, let's say. And I discovered something the other day very quickly, and your listeners may want to pay attention to this. It's called News Nation, and it's coming out of Chicago, September 1st. it's being launched by WGN, which is one of the bigger networks there. But they have a network of stations around the U.S. that are. They built this news organization from scratch with really good talent, and their kind of ethos is to present the news without bias, without a kind of twist. And it's going to be really interesting to see how they do it, because it's not only going to be on the air, so to speak, but on social media. They built a new app. They're going to do radio too. So it's going to be really interesting to see that. And in fact, I too have been talking to a lot of people during lockdown, because we had a lot of time on our hands, about maybe starting something new as well, in terms of getting a different kind of news out there to people. So stay tuned.
But there are always those people who have, those people that buy into conspiracy theories. Even when you give them the facts, they will still call it a conspiracy. So, we're just doing this for the people who really want the truth, right?
Right, exactly. And I think there's a huge appetite out there. What I try to do, whether it's for CNN Opinion or on my podcast, which by the way is called Global Impact, or even in interviews like this, is I try to give people perspective.
I'm going to get back to that because
Sure.
I want you to leave some information on it.
Okay, yeah. So I try to give perspective. What I say is I try to connect the dots, the geopolitical dots. So why, for example, if there's a land grab by Russia in eastern Ukraine or in Belarus, why should Americans care, or why should Canadians care? But you know what? The fact is, and if the pandemic has taught us anything, is we're such an interconnected world right now. What happens on the other side of the earth could affect you, your job, your mood, even your food supply, your supply of PPE. It's caused a lot of, I think, reflection on how we're interconnected. So definitely these things do have knock-on effects. And by the way, the other thing I've been writing and commenting a lot is that how dictators or strongmen have been using COVID-19 to level the playing field in their favor, cancel elections, harass or lock up journalists, put away their opponents. We're talking about places like Hungary, Belarus, of course, Brazil, a lot of other countries where they've taken this very, very far and suspended civil liberties, basically. And people during lockdown couldn't come out and protest. They could do stuff on social media, but in some countries, I think it was in Brazil, people came out and hit pots and pans to make a noise to signal their displeasure. But these autocrats, some of them have really manipulated COVID-19 to level the playing field in their favor. But I was talking, we recently had the Aspen Security Forum, and I was talking to a couple of experts there, and they said that in most cases, that kind of reaction by autocrats have not worked in their favor. The virus has actually gotten worse. So hopefully they'll learn their lesson.
Hopefully, that's all we can do. Michael, have you ever felt threatened as a journalist who reports the truth, or the truth based on your opinions? Have you ever been threatened? Have you ever felt like your life was in danger because of a story you reported?
Not really, although when you're writing about big corporations or about autocrats like Xi Jinping, you do think about what could be waiting for you up the road. I mean, I love Hong Kong. I've lived there, I've worked there, I have many friends. And I don't know if I'm going to be able to go back there. And that makes me very, very sad because of the imposition of a new national security law, which can target people like me. I've written very critically about it. And the interpretation of this law is very wide. The wording is very vague. So even if I were transiting through Hong Kong International Airport, which is a very important hub, if they wanted to, they could pick you up and then guess what? Send you to China for trial. And at the moment, as you may know, we have two Michaels there in China who have been incarcerated. The Canadian government is very upset because this was believed to be in retaliation for our stopping the CFO of Huawei in Vancouver Airport on a US extradition warrant. So now we're paying the price by them taking our citizens and incarcerating them. But I did feel a bit nervous from time to time as in my spokesperson's roles. Definitely with the OSC in Ukraine, even though we had a lot of security and bulletproof vests and armored vehicles and that kind of stuff. When you're in territory controlled by rebels, it can get pretty scary. I'll tell you a quick story. A few days after MH17 crashed, I would do a lot of interviews from the roof of our hotel in Donetsk City. And one time I was just about to go live on CNN, and we had Turkish cameramen there, and he turned on the light, and we were ready to go live. And then there was gunfire from below. I guess it attracted the rebels. So, but in this kind of typical Turkish tough guy way, all he said was kneel down, and he put the tripod down, the lights down, and we went live anyway, and it made for great TV. He was out front. It was out front with Aaron.
You scared?
A little bit, but you have your adrenaline going, and we're up on a roof, and it would have been for the whole world to see, and then there were other times. I mean, when I worked for UNICEF, I was 2 years and a bit as spokesperson in East Jerusalem. And as spokesperson there, whatever I said would either offend the Palestinians or the Israelis or both. But not only that, we did travel a lot to the Gaza Strip and to the West Bank. And going to the Gaza Strip is an entirely different world. Heck of a lot of security. And when you're crossing over into the Palestinian part, you're carefully watched by Israeli snipers. One wrong move could land you in a bit of trouble. But thank God, no scratches, no broken bones. I mean, I've traveled in vehicles and convoys in in areas that have been heavily mined, landmines. I remember, for example, when I was working with UNICEF in Tajikistan, and for the first time, we crossed over into Afghanistan. And this is when the Taliban were still being flushed out of the northern part of the country. And we drove through a minefield there. And that was pretty hairy, I would say. But my friend, one of my best friends, Shar, who's in Seattle, bless her soul, always says, I think you have angels looking over you.
I think so too. Sounds like you've been in a lot of danger zones and you escaped unscathed, so you definitely have some form of protection.
Yeah.
Before we run out of time, Michael, tell us a little bit about your podcast and where people
Sure.
could find it.
Well, this is something that I always wanted to do, is do a podcast that perhaps may lead to a TV show. It's called Global Impact. It's roughly every week. And it's something I started before I left Portugal because I had a lot of time on my hands there. And what it really is, again, it's connecting the geopolitical dots so you don't have to. And, I always say out of tragedy comes opportunity as well. And I hope this is also a good advice for people, is to always look for ways where you can, not benefit from a tragedy, but, look at things that aren't being done, for example. So I knew I had a big network out there, and I knew that a lot of politicians, diplomats, CEOs were stuck at home, and they had this, the technological setup. So
Yeah.
at that time, it was very, very easy to get a hold of people, and it still is. So I've had very incredible people, as you do on your show, former ambassadors. I mean, I had Jim Rogers on as a guest. He's a very well-known financial commentator based in Singapore, American. I had William Taylor. Everyone will remember that name from the Hill testimony on the so-called quid pro quo scandal. He was the acting U.S. ambassador to Ukraine, and his testimony is very widely remembered. Others too, chefs, people from, I want to move on a little bit to the entertainment world, and people from the travel industry. Now I'm doing a lot more talking about travel. So yeah, you can find it on all of the platforms, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, another one called Anchor FM, and it's called Global Impact.
That's awesome. And I hope that you will get a lot of people checking it out because you're so interesting.
Thank you. Well, we're kind of vehicles, aren't we, for opinion? We interview people, we get them to give opinion, give us their perspective on things. So I think it's all about making people feel comfortable, that you're very good at.
Thank
And
you.
getting them to keeping it as a conversation rather than an interview, I think is what people really like. But it's really, I think also the trust factor. This is the thing about our business. The word gets out very, very quickly if you're not trustworthy, or if you, forgive my language, screw someone over. It takes a long, long time to get to a certain position, to have a platform, but that potential fall is very, very quick. So you have
True.
to be very, very careful and just empathetic, and I think truthful, and people really appreciate that.
It's true. So, Michael, I would like, before we wrap up, share with us the one thing that stood out in your mind over the years, something, the one incident that's left an indelible mark. Maybe there's more than one, but share one with us.
Sure. Um, I think it would be my years with UNICEF. I'll give you actually two very quick ones if I can. So I talked to you about going into Gaza, and there was one trip I particularly remember, because what I would do is I would document things for UNICEF. I would bring stories, turn them into human interest stories, and send them out to the world through UNICEF. And there was one time we went to the northern Gaza Strip where it borders Egypt. It's called Rafah. And we interviewed a teenage girl there, 15, maybe 16. And, we asked her, well, what would you like to do when you grow up? And she goes, I'd like to get even. And I think you know what that means. And, she said, just look around me. I mean, look at the rubble my school is. And right next to her, I will never forget this, there was a mural of Mickey Mouse, which is a very kind of iconic, evocative kind of character. And it was all shot up with gunfire and mortar fire. And that is their life there. So they grew up in a life of hopelessness, violence. It gets to the point where kids there in schools, when they hear gunfire or incoming fire, they know exactly when to jump under their desks to avoid getting hit. The other time was quite a few years ago during the huge earthquake in Pakistan, in the high elevation mountains. And we went to some very, very remote areas by helicopter, mostly by boats, improvised boats. And I'll never forget, there was one time where we did a, not exactly an officially sanctioned boat trip up the river, Indus River. But we went to a very remote part, and we met these young girls who had never spent a day in a classroom. And it was just so amazing just to talk to them, because they were very nice, but they couldn't write. Of course, they could speak, but they were so innocent. And that's the one thing they said, is that if anything, we'd like to go to school. And then just to quickly end that part off, because it reminded me of something else, I was in Lesotho, which is a mountain kingdom landlocked in South Africa. It's one of the poorest countries in the world. And it's been one of the countries in the world which has been most hit by the HIV and AIDS. And there, kids lack all sorts of things. But there are days when they don't go to school. And why don't they go to school? Because they don't even have footwear. Or in a lot of countries, a lot of people don't know this, you can't go to class unless you have a uniform. And some of them can't afford uniforms, or some of them get tattered. And I thought, it's so sad. And maybe I'll repost that interview in one of my podcasts, because I talk to the teachers and I talk to the kids, and your heart just breaks for them, because it's not their fault that they have this sort of circumstance and this poverty. But, even with the hit that the world has taken from COVID, there's still a lot of money out there sitting on the sidelines. And if it could do any good to help children like that, that would be really, really fantastic. So again, we can't forget people like that. And I bring you back to the memory of that Palestinian girl, because we want someone like her to have hope, to have opportunity, to be able to go to school safely, and not fear for her life, because no child in the world should have to fear for their life going to school.
How old are these girls? What age group?
Oh, they were in their teens. The one in Gaza was in her teens, but the ones in Pakistan, the ones I spoke to were, they would have been kind of probably eligible for grade 4 or 5. And the ones in Lesotho, we're talking about young teenagers there. And again, really, really keen to go to school. But in a lot of the countries I've worked in, it isn't sometimes the availability of schools, but it's the quality of education. 50 kids stuck in one classroom with one teacher, kids being tired because they have to walk an hour to go to school, so they can't concentrate. Not enough food is another big issue. It's a big problem, as you know, right now in Lebanon. So, yeah, and I know it's a problem right now in the debates, especially in the United States, whether to send kids back to school. But even there, I mean, you have issues that kids who go to school, that's basically where their one nutritious meal will be served.
Right.
So people have to keep that in mind as well.
Thank you. We're out of time, but before we go, I really must ask you this. Since it's seeming like we are going to be setting the bar at a new norm, I think normal as we used to know it is probably not going to exist anymore because COVID does not appear to be going anywhere anytime soon. What does this mean for your career?
Well, that's a great question. Well, for sure, I'm going to be traveling less. I like to think that we will overcome this. We will go back to a near kind of normal once a vaccine is widely available. But look, I interviewed, for example, the former acting Surgeon General of the US, and he said, you know, it's funny in the West we shake hands, but you know what? It's not a hygienic thing to do. And it probably shouldn't be a common practice anyway, especially, for example, during flu season. But for me, yeah, I think it would be especially the travel. But I mean, for example, right now, you know, I'm lining up guests for future installments of my podcast. And one of the people I'm keen to interview is, you'll like to hear this. We do have a lot of women running for politics here. And the Deputy Premier of Quebec, the province right next to me, is a woman. She's young. I've noticed her during the pandemic because, you know, you had a lot of chief health officers or premiers or deputy premiers who really stood out, you know, for the way they spoke and for just their ability to project and convince people to do the right thing. So she's one of them. But, you know, we're in this kind of weird period. Should I go all the way to Quebec City and interview her with this fantastic microphone, or should I do it virtually? But that's what I really miss, is that contact. And probably if we do it, we'll be wearing face masks. And as you well know, being in this kind of visual business too, so much is projected by the face. And when you're only seeing 1/3 of it, it's a very different ballgame. And even more so when it's done virtually. So that'll really change things. But I will, one way or another, find a way to be out there on the front lines and giving people new perspectives and telling the truth and giving people insight as much as I can. So I'm not stopping anytime soon, I can tell you that.
Michael, it has been a great half an hour. You were magnificent, but I knew you would
Thank
be.
you.
That's why I
My
wanted
pleasure.
to do this. So thank you, and maybe you'll have more time to start your food business, and I will find your food truck. Because
Looking forward to that.
Cooking, and I know you're an amazing cook. So thank you so much. Stay safe. We'll be in touch. And thank you so much for watching Conversations with Jennylyn. When a conversation is all you need to be inspired, and I know Michael has inspired you. And I will see you next time.